Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. When I was growing up, my friends and I always knew that someone was watching, in a good way. There were people keeping their eye on the neighborhood to make sure we were staying safe and staying out of trouble. If one or more of us kids got some bad ideas, it was not uncommon for an adult to intervene and put us on the correct path. That's what the community was like. People looking out for each other. This past Monday night, there was a ceremony at Elizabeth Park honoring 5 Black women who did exactly that for North Nashville. Later this hour, we'll visit with their descendants to get a better sense of what they meant to the community. But first, it's time for At Us. Yes, every Thursday, we're taking time to read the comments so you don't have to. I'm encouraging you to literally at us on Twitter at This Is Nashville, on Instagram at This Is Nashville_WPLN, and at WPLN News on Facebook. Joining me now with a look back at our past week is our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Hey, Anna.
Hey, Khalil. Glad to be back in the studio.
Good to have you back. So, what have our listeners been talking about this week?
So after Friday's show, we got an email, from listener Ida in Kingston Springs asking us to do a fact check on how much money the Iroquois steeplechase has donated to Vanderbilt's Children's Hospital over the years. So I did a little searching, and according to Vanderbilt Medical Center, the steeplechase has donated around $11 million since 1981. So that's about a span of 40 years.
Wow.
The steeplechase hasn't said how much money was raised from last week's event, but in 2021, the Children's Hospital received $115,000. So, Vanderbilt also put out an impact statement in 2019 saying that those donations have aided with their pediatric cancer initiative.
You know, I love it when we get to answer listener questions, so y'all keep them coming, please. What else have listeners said?
So I don't know if you remember, but on Monday we had a show about sexism in country music.
Yes, I love that episode.
Same, it was really great. But during that show, the Taurus Music Group tweeted at us saying, "Great conversation right now with Marissa Armas on This Is Nashville. I feel like Nashville doesn't know what to do with brown, Mexican, and Asian artists. We don't always get the same opportunities, so we focus on getting the music right and hoping for the best." And that really, really sounded similar to what we heard from our guest, Leah Turner, who, she brought up that she's Mexican-American, and she really spoke about how the record label and the industry try to play down that heritage. Also, this came up in our previous episode on the changing face of country music with the Black Opry and Asian country artists.
Yeah, I really love that these points are being made because it's just enlightening people to things that they may not have considered when they think about country music.
Yeah. So after after Tuesday's show on the Freedom Riders, I found out that you, Khalil, have a personal connection to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Yes, I do. My mother texted me after the show about it. She listens to every episode. And SNCC was one of the groups that participated in the Freedom Rides and the sit-ins in the 60s. My mom was actually a member in college, but her activism started when she was much, much younger.
When I was about 12, I went to visit my grandmother in Gastonia, North Carolina. And a friend and I went to town. We decided to go to this luncheonette, and I sat at the counter. And my friend didn't, and she got very nervous and upset. And they told me that they didn't serve niggas. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm not one. And I was going to sit there. But my friend who lived there and had gone with me started crying, and she got so upset. And so I left. I didn't want her to be that upset. But by the time we got to the bus stop, I was like, no, I'm just not going to let them treat me like this. So when I got on the bus, I sat in the front. And then the bus driver told me, you can't sit here, you have to sit in the back. And I refused. And then they called the cops. And the cops tried to get me off, and I refused. At that point, everybody got off the bus, and I was the only one on there. And so the bus driver drove me to my grandmother's door. And my grandmother was standing out there waiting for me because somebody had called her. And she was very upset when I got off the bus.
Thanks to you, Mommy. My mother, Olufemi Ekulona. I actually heard that story for the first time in 2020 when I was in New Mexico and we started covering events on race relations and racism after George Floyd's murder. And it was really interesting because during that time I got to really find out a lot of stories about my parents. If we ever do a story about teenagers cutting class in high school to hang out in the East Village in the late 50s or early 60s, my mother's going to be great for that.
Well, I really love hearing your mother's voice on the air. And I think it's actually amazing that she was able to, challenge segregation at such a young age. And I can't really imagine that was very easy for her.
I know it wasn't. And she definitely instilled that in all of her children. Okay, moving to a lighter topic, we have a request for our listeners.
Yes. Producer Tasha A.F. Lemley is putting together a show about bucket lists. So we're asking our listeners to tell us what is on their bucket list or, if they scratched off anything interesting on their bucket list. If you have a story to tell, you can leave us a voice message at thisisnashville.org. So, Khalil, what's on your bucket list?
Okay, bucket list. I have two things on my bucket list. One is totally untenable. I've always wanted to be a part of some sort of Ocean's 11 type bank heist, but that's out of the picture. So the one that I'm hoping for is I want to see the Earth from the view from space.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I have to get with Bezos or one of these guys.
Well, with how things are going, there is a potential for that to actually happen.
Yes. What about you?
Well, I really, really want to take my mom to Machu Picchu, but I think that counts as her bucket list, not exactly mine. So
Okay.
I need to do a little more thinking about that.
That's awesome. Well, thank you to our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon, for this roundup. Anna, we'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Of course. And our listeners know where to find me.
Don't forget to add us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and let's keep the comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey to let us know what topics you want us to cover at thisisnashville.org. It's super easy and quick and helps us produce shows with your needs and interests in mind. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk with the artist that spearheaded a mosaic project that honors 5 matriarchs of North Nashville. Do you have stories about the people who kept your neighborhood connected? Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. Elizabeth Park sits on a triangle-shaped piece of land between Jane Street, Arthur Avenue, and 11th Avenue North. It's not a big park, and the senior center there is also pretty small, but it holds a lot of history. And on Monday night, there was a ceremony to celebrate some of that history with art. Our producer, Steve Harouche, was there.
It's a beautifully warm, breezy night in North Nashville, the golden hour. A crowd is gathered for the dedication of 5 wood mosaics, each depicting a woman who was a pillar of this historically black neighborhood. Artist Simone Boyd has carefully installed the mosaics over concrete slabs that were once windows on the side of the Elizabeth Park Senior Center. Simone calls on Clemmy Greenlee, founder of Nashville Peacemakers, to open the ceremony.
Miss Clemmy had 5 young men show up on her porch this morning because they didn't have anywhere else to go. And Miss Clemmy embodies the love, care, and courage that these 5 women embody. So y'all welcome Miss Clemmy!
But let me just say I'm honored. I am so honored when she called me and told me what this was because of what I do. how I take in everybody, from stray animals to stray people. And never knew where that came from, but I remember it was always a Miss Margreat, a Hattie Mae, or Mary Mae, or Katie Mae. It was always, get over here, get your butt in here, get some of these cookies, get this cake. And I used to always say, wait today, y'all, where are they at? Where are they at? Where is their stories? Their stories have raised me. Their stories is still out here. And we got to keep this right here going. So when it was told who was being honored, man, I told my mama, we never had a house to ourselves. Mama, who is these people? Mama, can I just sleep in the bed one time by myself? Mama, they bringing the dog with them. So that is how y'all was raised. That is the core of our ancestors. And this is what we need to get back out here.
Simone started this project with a single mosaic, a portrait of civil rights leader Curly Magruder, made from hundreds of small wood squares. As she started asking around the neighborhood to find people to support the project, she found another hero of the movement.
Mr. Kwame Lillard, and I'm going to try not to cry about this, but in 2018, when he found out that we were honoring Miss Magruder, Miss Magruder's legacy is not very visible. Not many people know about her. So when I called Mr. Lillard to ask him to tell me stories, what do you know about her? He's like, what are you doing? Come to my office. Come to my office. He wrote a check for $300 to support this mosaic. Didn't ask any questions.
Kwame Lillard passed away in 2020, so he never got to see the completed project. But as of today, Curly Magruder's mosaic is no longer alone.
Miss Nora Ransom. Next, we have Miss Mary Louise Watson. Miss Juno Frankie Pierce. May Boddie.
For some of the people gathered, these women aren't just community icons, but mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers. It's an especially significant day for the descendants of Momma Boddie, who was famous for handing out popsicles to neighborhood kids in the summer. Today, the day of her ceremony, would have been her 101st birthday. After telling a little bit of each woman's story, Simone reflects on the difficult times they lived through and how much they overcame. And with the horrific racist shooting in Buffalo on everyone's minds, how the struggle continues.
I want to close by saying how these women and their faith in God sustained them. My Boddie, she went to Cleveland Street. Miss Mary and Miss Ransom were both senior ushers, I believe, senior ushers at 14th Avenue Baptist. Their faith in God sustained them during trials of terror. You know, y'all, as I woke up this morning, I was just crying because I was like, how do we move forward? But I think they show us the way. Yes. We care for each other. We make popsicles if we can. we give a little more to people who have a little less. We do the simple things, and that's what's going to compound and turn this thing around for us, y'all.
These matriarchs of the neighborhood have been memorialized thanks to the Art Against Violence project. My first guest initiated the project. I'd like to welcome artist M. Simone Boyd to This is Nashville. Simone, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Khalil.
What inspired you to begin the Art Against Violence project? Tell me.
Really, my neighbors. I have to say that while I got to guide and lead the project, it definitely wasn't me alone. Many hearts and hands made this possible, but after a tragedy in our own neighborhood and actually MLK weekend, we as neighbors were figuring out how can we respond. And we had a couple community meetings, and one of the descendants who will be a guest later came to that community meeting, and Metro Public Health was there and Metro schools were there. And we were just trying to figure out, how do we respond? How do we do something? And the idea came for youth engagement and youth employment, and it grew from there.
What else did you all do to get it off the ground?
We raised money. We talked to neighborhood people. We had to get permits and permissions from Metro Parks and Metro Arts. And local people. We talked to a lot of people about what they were hoping and how they would respond. And we partnered with a local nonprofit that does woodworking apprenticeships, Maple Built, right in our neighborhood, just a few blocks over from Elizabeth Park. They do woodworking mentorships with young men in the neighborhood. Restorative justice, it's a restorative justice program. And our partnership with the neighbors and with Maple Built, they actually created the mosaics.
So I can imagine, this type of undertaking is not really an easy lift. But I'm interested, when you were talking to the neighbors and the people in the community about this idea, what were their emotions? What were they expressing to you?
I think a sense of despair. The week of that tragedy in 2018, we talked to so many, even my next door neighbor, we talked to so many people who were just at a loss, just couldn't sleep well. How could this happen? And I think that sense of confusion and loss but a sense of hope at being able to do something and not being able to be empathetic. So I think it was despair moving towards hope, if I had to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you all are developing this and you're kind of figuring it out, tell me, what were your goals?
To connect each other, to really have a sense of we're not alone and to foster belonging. We had the youth violence strategist from Metro Health Department. When he came and talked to us, he said, what you need to be focusing on is fostering belonging for youth, because as your neighborhood changes, there's a sense of being uprooted and youth need to know that they belong. So how you're connecting with youth, that's really going to determine where the future of our youth and our neighborhood go. And so people being able to connect with youth in this way felt like a good step forward.
The first mosaic was of civil rights leader Curly Magruder. Tell me, why did you all choose her?
It's such a good question. So there was a lot of discussion about who would be featured. And we really wanted to feature someone who loved youth. Because again, we were thinking about youth and how can we support youth. And Curly loved youth. She was going back to the intro when you're talking about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. Curly bailed people out of jail. She, especially students, she was kind of a mama bear. And she had a direct connection to this neighborhood. People knew her and remembered her. And so we wanted to uplift and ignite public memory for someone whose story we felt was kind of being hidden.
Now, Curly's grandson, Jeff Magruder, was at the ceremony on Monday. And full disclosure, Jeff serves on WPLN's board of directors. He's also a frat brother of mine. He wasn't able to join us today, but we caught up with him yesterday. Now, Jeff lived at his grandparents' house for a while when he was a kid, and his grandmother definitely made an impression. Let's listen.
The room that I stayed in, she had all of her political swag and falling out of the closets, from fans to handbills to anything that she was promoting politically in the area. And so that was really my first memories of her and understanding this is who she was. She had a room full of this material, and she was a tall woman. And just in her dealings with me, she never spanked me or never yelled at me, but just the authority in which she spoke. Respect was just given from day one. There's a picture at the Magruder Center of her with a beret, a red beret on, and she's a tall woman in a jean outfit, tall, and she has her megaphone, and the look on her face as she gets folks behind her. She's marching. This is just the MLK walk that she would lead every year, just as a reminder of where we came from to get some of our rights. And so the symbolism I have of her standing so tall and just this menacing look, I want to kick some ass today, and we're gonna do it. That's the memory that I have of her, and I'm a fiercely competitive person, and so I can look to that when I'm in a spirit where I've got to kick some ass. So.
That reminds me of my grandmother. Simone, I understand that Jeff has kind of followed in his grandmother's footsteps in other ways as well. Is that right?
Yes, I've never heard that story, but I loved hearing that story. So Miss Magruder, her story is kind of a little bit sad because she was so vocal about not only voting rights and what we needed as a people of Black people, but she was also demanding economic justice. And it cost her a lot personally. I'm told that she ended up being kicked out of the NAACP and that her husband divorced her. And she died, almost with very little. And Mr. Kwame Lillard actually helped pay her utility bill before her death. But what's so beautiful about the story is that Jeff Magruder, who we just heard, he left his job as a VP at Pinnacle Bank and came back to the neighborhood. And he's helping modernize operations at Citizens Bank, which is the oldest continually operating African-American bank in the country, right here on Jefferson Street. And he's helping to build Black wealth by being in banking. And so it's like her legacy is continuing. It lives on.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking with artist Simone Boyd, who headed the effort to hang mosaics at the Elizabeth Park Senior Center, honoring the legacy of 5 North Nashville women. Now, I'd like to welcome a few of their descendants. Barbara Watson and Leitha Carter are daughters of Mary Louise Watson. Welcome to both of you to This is Nashville.
Thanks, Khalil.
Thank you.
So tell me about your mom, Mary Louise.
She was quiet-spoken, tall, very determined, and she wouldn't call herself a fierce leader. She would say she was doing what she needed to do for her family. My mother was not educated past grade 8, but she wanted more for her children, her 5 children. So she always talked about, you need to do more. My mother and my father sacrificed money, putting it aside, to buy a book, a whole set of the World Book Encyclopedia. We were the only one in our neighborhood that had a full set, brand new set. Mm-hmm. My sister and I were talking just this morning how we remember different kids in the neighborhood that would come to our house to do their homework because we had the World Book Encyclopedia.
Okay.
So that's the kind of family we grew up in.
True. We didn't go to the library,
Yeah.
But our library was at the house. What you needed, our resources at the house. And summer school was at the house. So yes, she was I always tell people, well, she was my first hero, shero, or whatever you want to call them, because she was not relentless in letting anybody get to her or under her skin. When she decided she was going to do something, her and my father would talk it over, and they would go forth. And I have the faith today because I saw my mother move in such a way through oppositions and everything by faith. She never grumbled. She never complained. She just went by faith. She'd sing her little faith song, and we're out the door.
I understand that. So it's like you both got to see your mother move mountains, so it's no question that you two think that you and understand and believe that you can fly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love that. Now, I understand that she was an initiator of desegregating schools back in the 50s.
She helped.
And that meant that you two were some of the first students to integrate schools here in Nashville.
I was. My sister was not. She went to the all-black school. I went to the all-white school.
What was that like, Barbara?
It was hell.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it any other way. But my first 6 years were calm to me because I never got in a fight, never had any opposition with any students or anything. But our first year trying to getting in there, that was hell because they threatened to kidnap me. They threatened to kill me. And back during that time, they were still hanging people. and kidnapping and killing people.
It was awful.
How old were you?
I was 6 years old.
She was 6. I was 8.
What was that like in the household? What would your parents tell you about that time?
Well, my father was a real protector of his family. He was a family man. My father, Hugh Willie Watson Sr., and my mother talked it over as to how they would approach this. My mom and my father went to they had meetings for the community and the families that were involved with starting the desegregation of schools. And it was determined my father would continue to work because he was the breadwinner. My mother was a homemaker. And after my sister was registered to school, we started getting threats. Back then, we didn't have private phones, lines. It was a party line is what they called it. So you could pick up the phone and hear someone else speaking and vice versa. And so the phone would ring and we started hearing all of these negative, all kind of things.
Remarks.
Wow.
They were terrible. So much so that my father told my mother to stop answering the phone. And if he was home from work, he would answer the phone. That's how bad it was.
So this work that your mother was doing made your household a target. You're hearing this on the party line. You know, one night that became really abundantly clear. Leitha, can you tell me about that night?
Well, you know, my mom would make she was making all these sandwiches and coffee, and they would put us to bed early, and I was always inquisitive, so I thought, well, they had the living room door closed, but I kept hearing a knock on the door. So I went to the door of the living room and opened it to peep in to see what was going on. And I saw all these men of the neighborhood, as well from the NAACP, CORE, and SNCC. They were rotating, staying in our home at night with shotguns, visibly to protect our families. That's how many threats that we had gotten. One day we were out in the yard playing, and there was this car, and I used to remember the color of the car, but I remember the model, 1956 Chevrolet.
Okay.
And it was full of, I'll say, college white men. They were screaming all kinds of epithets to us. Don't bring that in back to school. We're going to kill that in. Go back to Africa. We heard all of that. So we were running back toward the house, and they threw these bottles out of the car, and the whole backyard exploded in fire. Now, I'm 8. My sister's 6. We're running back to the house screaming. And before the fire department got there, neighbors came from everywhere, and they beat the fire out. Of course, the guys in the car, they took off back down the alley. And I can't remember to this day whether or not my father was home during. Do you remember, Barbara?
I don't
If
remember.
my father was, she was so young. But that will forever be ingrained in my mind because I'd never been exposed to anything like that. We were always well protected between my mother and my father. But I saw how much people hated us because of the skin of the color of our skin.
I mean, 8 years old, 6 years old.
Yeah,
that is
that was
an
terrible.
incredibly scary moment to live through. I wonder, did that slow your mother down at all?
No. Nope. Nor my father.
Nope.
They were determined we're going to go forward with this.
What did they do next?
Right.
Well,
like she said, the men would come to our home at night, and after that, they started having more meetings. Mm-hmm. We were drugged from church to church, up at Fisk and different places. And I do remember being at Fisk, and I do remember being at First Baptist Capitol Hill,
right?
And different churches, that were involved in the movement, or what they call the movement. And so they were determined that Barbara's going to go to school. So, like I said, my mother would always get up in the morning, fix breakfast, do what she had to do, and she would get me and my sister together and stuff. And a lot of times I had to have police protection.
Right.
So sometimes we rode in a police car to school. And if they weren't available at the time and they were covering another area, then Richard Smith's funeral home would volunteer to come by and get me to take us to school. A lot of times, my mother would seemed like at the last minute, the police would let her know that we got a call this morning. We don't recommend that you walk her to school today. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have an escort.
Okay.
So that's the way we went.
Wow.
Yeah.
Simone Boyd is still with us. Simone, what has it meant to you learning about these women's stories and how they've impacted the community?
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. I finally got to talk to Miss Carter last week, and I just cried in our first conversation. So
she did.
Very grateful for them. Very grateful.
Grateful to have you with us. Simone Boyd is the artist behind the Art Against Violence project that was just dedicated at Elizabeth Park in North Nashville. Simone, thank you so much for being with us today. We're taking a quick break. When we come back, we'll meet a few more descendants and talk about how their North Nashville neighborhood has changed over the years. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Lekolona, and this is Nashville. Earlier this week, 5 North Nashville women were honored for their pivotal role they played for their community, with mosaic portraits at Elizabeth Park. We've been talking this hour with some of their descendants, and I'd like to introduce a few more. Reverend Margreat Smithson is the daughter of Willie Mae Boddie, who's also known as Momma Boddie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, Momma Boddie, with a nickname like that, I can have an idea, but what was she known for in the neighborhood?
Really for caring and loving all of the children. Her thing was love the kids, you raise them right, and she was a praying woman, so she prayed for not only her kids, but the other kids in the neighborhood. I told Simone, my mother, along with the neighbors, they were like neighborhood watch before there was a neighborhood watch.
Okay.
Because if you were in the neighborhood, everybody watched out for you. Mm-hmm. They also know that even though Momma Boddie was short in stature, she swore she was 5'1". She did good to be 5 feet. But they knew that she had their backs. Mm-hmm. And even though you could call the police or whatever, her thing was she'd yell at somebody and her voice was so direct, you knew not to cross her.
Sure.
So most people didn't. But the children, she loved the children, not only in that neighborhood, people's children's children. She just loved them.
Was she a good cook, I imagine?
Oh, don't talk about the cooking. Uh-oh. Yeah, because she was the one, like anybody knew Momma Boddie, they could go by her house and get a meal. I mean, Wednesday come, you have somebody, Momma Boddie, do you have any greens or macaroni and cheese left over from Sunday? Sunday was always, it's almost like a banquet because she always get up. I don't know how she did it, but she prepared a full meal before going to church. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about just some little snack. We're talking about greens, ribs, macaroni and cheese, sweet potatoes.
Wow.
She did it all. And in addition to baking, you might have a pound cake or a chest pie, but that was it. But they knew when we came on Sundays, other people come and you think, am I going to get to eat my own mama's food? Because she was feeding everybody else.
I also heard something about popsicles.
Oh, yeah. In the summer, she, mother was very strict on us too. We couldn't go but certain people's yards. and we couldn't go farther than she could see you.
Okay.
And so when it was hot, we didn't have to worry about trying to go to the store for popsicles because she made what we call something like Cool Pops. You just freeze up the Kool-Aid and make it like a popsicle or put it in a paper cup, and that's what you had. And she, not only for her kids, but for all the kids in the neighborhood. And they loved her for that.
She took care of everybody.
She took care of everybody. I know a lot of times I look at people nowadays with their smaller kids. Mother would keep kids, whether you could afford to give her something or not, she babysit those kids. And if my mama babysitted your toddler, within a week or so of being with her, they were already potty trained because she said she wasn't being bothered with changing diapers.
Oh, wow.
But if she got them as babies, which was really weird, she had what she called a lap pot. She would feed the kids sitting up on the laptop in her lap, so they felt the love. They felt that they could be, confident that she's not going to drop them. Once she did that, then they graduated to the little chair that sit on the floor. Then she got them comfortable with that. And next thing you know, they were going to the bathroom by themselves.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah, she could do it.
Alisha Haddock is also with us. She's the granddaughter of Nora Evelyn Ransom. Hi, Alisha. Alisha, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. How you doing?
Okay, I'm okay. How are you, Khalil?
Doing well. It's such a pleasure to have you with us on the show. So tell me, what do you remember about your grandmother?
Oh my goodness. I remember so much. I just remember her her loving hand on all of her grandchildren. I was saying to my cousins, I think we've all, at least the older grandchildren, probably have lived with my grandmother at some point in our lives, just because her home was so welcoming and we wanted to be there. And, another fond memory that had such an impact on my life and on our family's lives is that we would go and vote together as a family. It was like an outing. Everyone would gather over my grandmother's house and we would go to Jones School to vote. Now, remember, this is when I was a child and I couldn't vote, but everyone went to experience voting, even if you weren't of age yet. It was almost like a rite of passage. So the younger group of us, we couldn't wait until it was our time to vote because it was held so special in our family's life. And so my grandmother led the charge. So she would be the first in line when it was time to go vote.
Wow, we need your grandmother more and more these days.
Right.
She, like the rest of these amazing women, held the community together during turbulent times. Did she ever talk to you about why that was so important to her?
Yeah, I remember a story, and of course, I wasn't born yet, but it was when Martin Luther King died. When he was assassinated in 1968, my grandmother sat in the living room and cried. And as the children were coming home from school and, everyone was getting home, that was a story that I've heard several times growing up because it was such a pivotal moment, not just for our family and, the Black community, but it was a pivotal moment in this country. And so to hear the personal experience of what that was like in our home, in our matriarch's home is something that also had an impact on me and the work that I do today, and how important it is to care for our leaders, our local leaders, our civil rights leaders. That's why, to have the 5 women on the murals, really memorializing them and what they've done is so pivotal today because everyone is coming from a different perspective. Each woman, each family, but we are held together by the struggles of our community. And then also, the descendants are still here and we're still keeping their legacies alive.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. I'm talking with some of the descendants of 5 matriarchs of North Nashville who are pillars of their community. Margreat, I want to ask you, what was the neighborhood like when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, the neighborhood that we lived in, and it was from like 14th Avenue over to Arthur, it was really all Black. And as I said, we cared for one another. And the neighbors, as I said, my mom and her neighbors, neighborhood watch before there was a neighborhood watch. And we didn't have to worry about people breaking in. For one thing, most of them probably would have known that Mama would have been able to recognize them if they were young. Mm-hmm. So they just didn't do it. It was very... to me, it was nice. I was listening to the other ladies, and I'm thinking, oh, my God, we didn't go through any of that. But I went to an all-Black school. I didn't get a chance to get in, and neither did my kids get a chance to get in on the integration. But I do remember when summer came for my sister and I, they had this thing with metro schools where they gave you, I forget what it was called, youth something, and you got a chance to work during the summer. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they put us over at North High School, which was all white. Mm-hmm. And we cleaned and straightened up. And I recognized that their books did not look like our books. Mm-hmm. They had better books than we did. We got the torn up books, the books that had been marked in. And now, if I was to say a discrepancy, I love education. My mother and father did too. In fact, the lady across the street, when I graduated from high school, Miss Everett, they got together and gave me my first little scholarship to TSU. But I remember coming up during those summers, we were cleaning the white schools. And their books were they got the new books. Mm-hmm.
True.
Barbara Watson and Leitha Carter are still with us, the daughters of Mary Louise Watson. So what do you two remember about the neighborhood?
Our neighborhood was mixed.
True.
We had white, we had Black, and it looked like some Indians on down there. But toward the bottom, what we called the bottom. Right. But anyway, our neighborhood was mixed. So I had white friends that I played with and everything. Before I even went to the neighborhood school that was going to be integrated. And after the first year, I walked with them to school and everything. But our neighborhood was mixed. And it was a community of watchfulness, yes, love, and protectiveness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Everybody protected the neighborhood, white, Black, or indifferent.
That's funny because here you have this neighborhood that's very diverse, and apparently it seemed to have this love, yet everything else in society is telling you that can't exist.
Yeah.
And your children at the time, when you see this, so you see the falsehood in that. Leitha, tell me, how did that kind of shape and frame your outlook as you grew older?
Well, I went to all-Black school. I went to Pearl High School. And after my sister started first grade and everything, we did see what they now call white flight, where the neighbors started moving out once the school was integrated. All the kids in the neighborhood used to play in our backyard. White, Black, it didn't matter. We just played as kids. Once she started to school, they couldn't come to our house anymore and play in our yard. Mm-hmm. Just 2 doors from our house was a white neighbor. Previously, their daughter was a majorette at North High School. We cheered her on because she used to play in our backyard. But once the school was integrated, or desegregation of schools started, she couldn't come to our backyard and play. We would still speak from a distance. Mm-hmm. You know, it was 25 years after the desegregation of schools, and they had an event to recognize all of the participants. Really, that was the first, I think, that Nashville did a big spread in the newspaper marking that 25th year. We were at the
World Baptist Center.
World Baptist Center, or the Baptist Seminary, American Baptist.
American Baptist, yeah.
Okay.
So they had all these people, and some of them I recognized. They were much older because we were kids then, and they would tell their experience. My mother stood up, which was out of character because she wasn't one to always say, I'm going to do this. And she started telling us that when we were receiving the phone calls, that one day she answered the phone and she recognized the voice. Mm. And that voice was of a neighbor that lived 2 doors down from us.
Oh.
She never told my father. That was the first time my sister and I heard that. And she said, I couldn't tell my husband because I knew if I told him, he would probably go kill him. Mm. So, at another time, I said, Mom, all these years you knew that and you never told us that you recognized the voice of, the people that were making threats. And she said, no. She said, I held it to myself. So my mother's faith because my father passed, and so it was just my mom and us 5 kids. My mother's faith pushed forward through to see the end. That neighbor's wife was diagnosed with cancer. My mother went to his front door and offered her services to help him with his ailing wife, to sit with her, wash her clothes,
clean her house.
Clean her house.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of person could do that, knowing that someone had made that kind of threat against her own child. But that's who my mother was. And when they interviewed us immediately after my mother passed, one of the things I said was that my mother was not an angel, but she was pretty darn close.
Yes, she was. Mm-hmm. Yes, she was. Now, Alisha, what type of changes have you seen in the neighborhood since back then?
Wow, it's amazing to hear these stories firsthand and to really, hear them being retold because our families, living in the same neighborhood, you hear these things, but going from then until to now, I just remember, we would drive down the street, Buchanan, and I would remember seeing people that we recognized or we would wave. It wasn't foreign to walk the neighborhood. It wasn't no, you could walk to the store, you would walk to school, you would really walk. And so a lot of that has changed because we've lost a lot of people, and not just because of age or our matriarchs, they've gone on and people have gotten older, but a lot of our community members are being displaced because of gentrification. I remember hearing the stories about white flight, right? And when the neighborhood was very diverse and how everybody interacted with each other. And then that changed. And then there was white flight. But now something else is going on. Now the community has been gentrified and neighbors are being pushed out because of affordability in a community that was, very vibrant and rich in culture, and it still is. But we also know that it was devalued in some people's opinion, right? And it was treated as such. It was under-resourced. Reverend Smithson talked about, their school's books compared to when North High was an all-white school, right? And that's where my mother and my aunts graduated. And so it looks like it's time now to rally together again, right? And or continue to, because I don't think we have stopped doing the work that our foreparents started. Like, none of this has stopped. It seems like we just have to press on the gas because we're trying to keep people in. Yeah. People wonder, what is good about Black families? What are the assets of Black communities? And it's the people.
Yes.
Right? It's the people that make up North Nashville, the people that make up communities that these women gathered their strength in and led in the face of fear. And I think, if we get to see that more, I think our community would be better off.
I want to thank you all for coming onto the show and sharing your ancestors' legacies with us. And thank you for just telling us these stories. Thanks to Barbara Watson, Leitha Carter, Reverend Margreat Smithson, and Alisha Haddock.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
We want to thank everyone who tuned in this hour. Tomorrow, the summer is nigh. That means it's time to fire up those grills. Tomorrow, we're talking all things meat from farm to table. I'm hungry. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche, Rose Gilbert, Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Simone Boyd. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram and let us know what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil A. Colonna. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.